Mrs. Hostetler here, and we are already on session 5 of our narrative writing unit. And this lesson is all about pausing to take a deep breath and think, how am I doing so far? We're going to do a little bit of reflecting and a little bit of self-assessing, which means you look at something you've done and you sort of grade yourself and see how you're doing so far. So that's what we're talking about for our session today. So I want to tell you about a friend of mine who is a runner. She runs because she loves to run and she's very athletic. She runs every single day and she always has all of her gear on and goes at the same time every day. But here's the thing about my friend. She expects herself to get better every single time that she goes out and goes running. She always has a goal that she's trying to meet. So the goal might be to run for longer, or maybe it's to run faster, to run in a quicker amount of time. Maybe it's to get better strides or to have better breathing when she's running. But she sets a goal for herself, and then she tries to meet that goal. And part of her meeting that goal is reflecting and thinking, have I done a good job of trying to accomplish my goal? How am I doing? And what can I do to get better? And just like my friend who is a runner, writers also have to set goals because we want our writing to get better each time that we do it. So we set goals for ourselves and we work hard every single day to meet them. So this is similar to, in the past, I've said that writing is like being an athlete. And this is definitely sort of coming back to that same analogy. Being a writer is like being a runner and setting a goal for yourself and going back and checking, what have I done so far to meet my goal? And if I haven't met my goal yet, what can I do in the future so that I'm getting closer to meeting my goal? So today I want to teach you that when a person wants to get better something, it helps for them to look back and to ask themselves those questions. So those questions are, how am I doing and how have I grown? And then they can think, okay, well, what can I do in the future to get better? And they can work hard towards getting better, towards meeting that goal. So people who want to get better at things have a way of keeping track of their progress. So my friend who's a runner has one of those fancy watches that tells her what her heart rate per minute is and how many strides she's taking, how quickly she's running, the distance that she has ran. So she uses that tool to keep track of the progress she's making. But maybe you didn't know that writers also have tools for keeping track of the progress that they're making. It's not a fancy watch, but it is something that you can use to make sure that your writing is improving. And if it's not improving, you can sort of look at it and be like, okay, I know what I need to do to start improving my writing. And so we are going to talk about that tool today. So that tool is called a narrative checklist, and I'm just going to pull it up on this other page. So this is a checklist for your writing. So basically what this means is that you can use this when you're writing a narrative story. And again, a narrative is just a piece of, it's a story. It's not an opinion or a persuasive paper. It's just a story. And a narrative doesn't necessarily need to be true or false. So that's in this document, they've sort of not really said if it needs to be a fiction or a nonfiction narrative. And of course, we're writing personal narratives, which are true. But either way, this is a writing checklist. And this is the 3rd grade one on the left, and the 4th grade one is attached on the right. So even if you're a 3rd grader and you want to push yourself to meet the criteria on the 4th grade one, you absolutely can do that. Or even if you're a 4th grader, you can look at the 3rd grade one and start there. But as a 3rd grader, you should be able to accomplish everything on the 3rd grade side by the end of the year, and the 4th graders should be able to accomplish everything on the 4th grade side by the end of the year. But for right now, you can look at either chart that you want to. So these are the goals that hundreds of adults have decided that 3rd and 4th graders should be able to do by the end of the year. And you will not be doing all of these things yet. These are goals that might take you all year to meet. But I bet there's some of these goals that you are able to accomplish right now. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the list. So if I look on the left side, in these gray boxes going down the left side, it starts with the word overall. So when they say that, they mean the entire story, overall the whole story. Was it told bit by bit? So that's sort of piece by piece. When you picture a story like a movie in your mind, you imagine it almost like scene by scene. And so was the story told bit by bit? And if it was, you would click, or you would check mark yes. You'd put a little check mark right here. And I'll just draw what a check mark looks like. But if you felt like no, they didn't do it at all, or they kind of did it sometimes, but not all the time, then you might leave a check mark in those other boxes, depending on how you feel about the writing. Okay, the next box is all about the lead, which is the first sentence in a story. And it can be just the first sentence or the first couple of sentences, but it says I wrote a beginning in which I helped readers know who the characters were and what the setting was in my story. So that's a goal that we're going to try and accomplish this year, is right from the get-go, you want the readers to know who are our characters and what is the setting. And remember, the setting is not just where, but when. When is the story happening? Where is it happening? Okay, transitions. I told my story in order, so from beginning to end in chronological order, using phrases such as a little later and after that. So you might start a story by saying, it was Tuesday and we went to the store. A little bit later, we went out to eat. After that, we had dessert at the Chocolate Mousse. Finally, we went back to my house and had a sleepover. So those words, like a little later, after that, and finally, they indicate to the reader that you're moving the story through time. That's why they're called transitions. It's where your story's transitioning from one time period to another time period. So that's another important thing that you need to have in writing a narrative story. The ending, I chose the action, talk, or feeling that would make a good ending and worked to write it well. So you want to have an ending that feels good and feels like an ending and has some action, talking, or feelings that make the reader feel like, okay, the story's over and that was a good ending. Organization is how you group your paragraphs and how you sort of separate different events in the story so that you know what happened first and what happened later, and then what happened last in the story. Elaboration is I work to show what happened to and in my characters. So that would mean that you have characters that you can see how they're feeling as the reader, and you can see what happened to them as the reader. So you've really incorporated your characters into the story. And the people that are reading it feel like they're connected to those characters. Okay, we're moving on to the next page. So it says the craft section, which is right here on the left. I not only told my story, but I also wrote it in ways that got the readers to picture what's happening, and that brought my story to life. And that's what we've really been talking about the past couple of days, is picturing that story like a movie in our minds and then writing it like that, because that's really how you get a story that is imaginative and fun to read, is by making it seem like a picture in the reader's mind rather than just words on a page telling things that happened. Okay, we're almost done. Spelling, I used what I knew about spelling patterns to help me spell and edit before my final draft. The second part, I got help from others to check my spelling and punctuation before I wrote my final draft. And we might not be doing that. If you're at home, it might just be having like one of your adults check it. Punctuation, I punctuated dialogue correctly with commas and quotation marks. That's a tricky thing that we'll be working on. Also, while writing, I use punctuation at the end of every sentence. We should all be doing that. As third and fourth graders, we definitely know how to put punctuation at the end of each sentence. And then the last one, I wrote in ways that help the readers read with expression, reading some parts quickly, some parts slowly, some parts in one sort of voice and others in another. So that's another awesome skill that great writers have, is they write in such a way that whoever's reading it knows how to read the story to make it the most exciting story it can be. Okay, so that is our narrative writing checklist. And again, like a person who is a runner, we are going to use this tool to track our progress, because again, these are goals that we want to accomplish by the end of 3rd and 4th grade. And even more than just that we want to accomplish them, we have to accomplish these. This is how you get a great score in narrative writing, is by doing all of these things in one story. So these are our goals that we're trying to meet, and we use these checklists frequently to self-assess, which means to look back on our own work and grade it. And it's kind of hard to do that. So what we're going to do to practice is grade another student's work. And often when you grade someone else's, you're much more able to be critical of their work and sort of look at it from like a little bit of an outside way, an outside perspective, and you can really think clearly about, did this person do A, B, and C? Well, they did A, definitely. They did not do B, and they kind of did C. So we're going to practice that with someone's story. And we actually read this story, I think it was the beginning of last week, but we're going to read it again. So this story is called Nothing, and this was written by a 3rd grader. And I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud, and you can just follow along with me on the page. I peered into my bag. Nothing. No gym tights, no leotard. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I thought back. Yes, I hadn't put my leotard back in the bag. I jerked down my head and pulled my t-shirt over my school tights. No, it didn't look nearly like a leotard that had been so comfortable I wore it until bed. Wow, my class was going to start in 5 minutes and I had nothing to wear. The tears came rolling. What was I to do? Hide in the closet till the class was over? No, I'd ask if I could borrow a suit. I rubbed away my tears and opened the door. Okay, so we're going to look at this piece of writing, and then we're going to look at the checklist and decide, did they do those things on the checklist? All right. Okay. Now I'm just going to use the 3rd grade side of this checklist. And I'm actually going to go ahead and erase some of the things that I wrote on this page. So let's see. Get my erasing tool. There we go. Erase all those different things because we don't need those anymore. Okay. All right. Oh, let me zoom in on this thing. Can't see that story at all. Oh, my face is getting huge. Well, that's not what I want. Okay, I have an idea. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so I found a different picture of that same worksheet. Okay, or that same journal entry. Okay, so do you feel like this person told the story bit by bit? If you had to say, yes, they definitely did, or no, they didn't at all, or they're starting to, what would you think? So if I'm looking at this and I'm trying to self-assess this, I might say, okay, well, they're looking into their bag. They're talking about their feelings when they realized it wasn't in there. They were thinking about, man, I wore this last night when I went to bed. Oh my gosh, class is going to start. I'm so upset. I'm going to start crying. And then they decide, no, I'm going to borrow a suit. I actually think the student did a really good job telling this story piece by piece. They didn't jump around too much. So I'm going to go ahead and give a check mark in the yes category because I feel like they did a really good job of doing that. Okay, the next part, I wrote a beginning in which I helped readers know who the characters were and what the setting was. Okay, well, I know that I think the only character in this story is the narrator, the person who wrote the story. However, I'm looking at the beginning and I'm thinking, okay, I don't really know what the setting is. I know they're talking about gym tights and leotards, talking about their class. So I'm thinking that they're either like at a gymnastics studio. I'm thinking that's where they are, but I don't know for sure. I think the author of this story could have done a better job telling me what the setting was, and also maybe some of the other characters. But there are some hints about where they are, so I think I'm going to put starting to. They're starting to do that, but remember, it needs to be at the beginning. Okay, transitions. I told my story in order by using phrases such as a little later and after that. Trying to think. I'm looking for those words that signify time, that time has changed. So, it peered into my bag, tears. I hadn't put my leotard back in my bag. My class is going. No, I don't think the student did a good job putting transitions in. I actually don't see any. So I'm going to put not yet. That's something that they need to work on. They've not yet done that. Okay, the ending. I chose the action, talk, or feeling that would make a good ending and worked to write it well. Okay. So let's see. They got some action. They've got a little bit of talking going on. But remember, we're looking at the end of this story. They're talking about the feelings of crying and what they're going to do. They're going to ask to borrow a suit, and that they go into the door. I think this is like kind of a medium ending. I think they're starting to do it, but it definitely could be better. There's some improvement to be made, but there is some stuff there that makes me think that they describe the feeling, and I like the ending of, I open the door and then we don't know what happens next. So I think I'm going to pick starting to. Okay. Organization. I used paragraphs and skipped lines to separate what happened first from what happened later and finally in my story. No, this person wrote one big paragraph. I think maybe they could have done a better job splitting it up. It is a very short story, so it's hard to say. I'm going to put that, no, not yet. They need to work on that a little bit more. Okay, we're moving down the list. Now we're on to elaboration. I worked to show what happened to and in my characters. So what I worked to show, let's sort of break this down. As the writer, you work to show what happened to the characters and how they felt on the inside is what that's saying. So I think they did do a good job of, sort of telling us what the characters' thoughts were and their feelings were. And we felt like we could relate to that character. Talked about their tears rolling down their cheeks and just the thoughts they were having. So I think the author did a great job. The writer did a great job with this part of the elaboration. I would say yes, they did a good job with that. Okay, we're moving on to craft. I not only told my story, but I wrote it in ways that got the readers to picture what was happening that brought my story to life. So this is that skill we've been working on of picturing it like a movie in our minds. I think this person maybe could have done a little bit of a better job describing those things. They did do a great, it's hard to say. I am impressed with how I feel like I can relate to this character, and I do think I can picture it. I almost am sort of in between the starting to category and the yes category. I almost want to do just in between because it's like a strong starting to and a sort of a weak yes. So I think I'm going to go somewhere in the middle. We're on to spelling. And I do just want to remind you or point out that spelling is important when you're writing. It absolutely is important. However, I don't want you to think that you have to get the spelling perfect every time you write a story, because then you might be spending your whole time where you're supposed to be writing worried about the spelling. And that's not the point of writing, although spelling is important. So I just wanted to remind you of that. And this person's entry, maybe this isn't their final entry, so we might give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt. They might have not known that this would be, on display and that we're grading it as if it's something that they have published. Okay, so spelling. I used what I knew about spelling patterns to help me spell and edit before I wrote my final draft. I'm looking through the spelling right now. That's what I'm doing. So I'm trying to see, do they spell things right? So far, pretty good. I see a couple words like puttin'. That's not a word. They're doing a good job with the contractions. They put an apostrophe in there. T-shirt. They spelled t-shirt wrong, but they spelled tea like the drink instead of T-E-E, like a t-shirt. I think they're doing a great job of spelling. But if we're looking at this like a final draft, I think there's some work that they could do. So I'm going to put a middle check mark. I got help from others to check my spelling and punctuation before I wrote my draft. Well, we don't know if this person did that or not, so I think we're going to skip that one. Punctuation. I punctuated dialogue correctly with commas and quotation marks. There's actually no dialogue in this story. There are plenty of places where there could be dialogue, but they didn't include it, so I'm actually going to put a no. While writing, I used punctuation at the end of each sentence. Yes, absolutely. This person definitely used punctuation at the end. They have some question marks. They have some periods. I'm not sure if they have any exclamation points, and they definitely could. But I'm going to go ahead and put a yes. They did put punctuation at the end. And then the last part, I wrote in ways that help readers read with expression, reading some parts quickly, some slowly, some parts in one voice and others in another. Well, I didn't have to read this story in one sort of voice or I didn't switch voices at all. So that's something they could have worked on. I did feel like I was able to read with expression. They have those short, medium, and long sentences. And for me, that as somebody who's reading this out loud, it actually made it enjoyable to read. I felt like there was some expression in my voice. And some parts quickly, some parts slowly. Not necessarily. I'm going to go ahead with the middle ground here. I'm going to say sometimes. Or they're working on it, but it's not perfect yet. Okay, so overall, this person did a pretty good job. They have a couple things that they accomplished, and they have several things they need to work on and several things that have been started but could be better. Okay, so that was just grading someone else's writing, which is sometimes, like I said, a little bit easier to do than grading your own writing. Okay, so what I would like for you to do for this writing assignment today is to find your best piece of writing in your writer's notebook. This could be something that you wrote before we started personal narratives, or even something that we started just last week. I'd like for you to reread your story, and then there is a checklist on Canvas, and it's the same checklist we used, and I want you to use that to assess your own writing. And remember, assess just means to grade yourself. It sort of also means just to reflect. I mean, this isn't a grade that's going to go on your report card. This is a tool you're using to check your own progress and to check if you're meeting those goals on the checklist. So you're going to use the checklist to look at your piece of writing and think, did I have a good beginning to my story? Did I make sure to tell the setting? Did I include dialogue? Did I punctuate things correctly? So then you'll write a check mark under the no, not yet, and yes for each goal, depending on if you accomplished it or not, or if you kind of started it. And then I want you to also draw a star next to the goals that you want to get better at. So let me show you what that looks like. So if I pull up the checklist again, let's say I am this person and I really want to get better at those transitions. I'm going to draw a star right here. You could even draw it in the little box. I just want to know what goals you're setting for yourself to get better at. And then after you do those things, I want you to go ahead and submit the assignment. So it's just one of those PDF worksheets on Canvas. So you'll go ahead and do the checklist on Canvas while you look at your notebook in front of you. And then once you've filled it out, go ahead and submit that worksheet. And I just want to see you being really honest with yourself about this assessment. No one should be marking yes for everything, and no one should be marking no for everything. There's going to be some no, some yes, and some middle ground here. I don't expect you, and you're not expected to, have accomplished all of these things already. We have just started the school year. So I do not want to see all yeses. I would really like for you to think about this and try and apply this checklist to your writing and be honest with yourself, because the only person you're hurting by not being honest is yourself. So to be a good learner, you have to be willing to look at what you've done and be honest about assessing it, and then thinking, okay, what can I do to get better? Like, let's reflect back on those questions. How am I doing? How have I grown? And what can I do in the future to get better? Okay, so you're going to fill out the checklist and submit it on Canvas. And then, there's one more thing I wanted to look at before I send you off on your way. Oh, how to write true stories. Let me pull that up. Okay, so I wanted to pull up a chart, and this has all of the things that we have worked on together to write a true story. So to write a true story, you find story ideas that are focused and important to you, and you write lots of entries. So we've started that by thinking of people and places that are special to us and writing stories that are focused on one small moment. So that's what that first blue card is all about. The second card in the middle, it says, make a mental movie of what happened and tell it in small, detailed, piece by piece. We've talked a lot about that recently. And then the last thing, which we just talked about today, is to remember that your self-assessments, remember your self-assessments and your goals. So your self-assessments are those checklists that you're using, that you will be using today to sort of grade or reflect on your own work. And don't forget about your goals as a writer. Those goals are so important, and we set those for a reason, and that reason is that we want to look back on them and accomplish them. Okay, that's it for today, writers. I know that you are going to do a great job. You already have been doing such an amazing job. I really would like to see some honesty with this self-assessment. So go ahead and get started. Find that piece of writing that you think is the best and check yourself and see how you're doing. And I'll check in with you tomorrow, writers. Good luck.